The questions, people have not heard answers from the commissioner, and she said yes. So yesterday, after the show, we waited almost 2 hours for her. This was scheduled. She was going to do a meeting in her hotel room, a conference call, and then she was going to join us. So Fritzy, for at least 90 minutes, is looking just for an update. We're standing by, we're waiting to interview her. They didn't, balk at anything,
That is her at the event that he is at.
The silence was deafening. For 2 hours, the crew of the Dan Patrick Show waited, cameras ready, questions prepped, expecting the WNBA commissioner herself to step into the spotlight. But she never came. Instead, sports legend Dan Patrick was left holding a bag of empty promises, revealing a saga that exposes the WNBA's deepest, most paralyzing fear. They are afraid of their own star, Caitlin Clark. While Cathy Engelbert was busy hitting practice shots just 50 yards away from the broadcast, she was canceling a meeting that could have defined her legacy. This wasn't just a scheduling conflict, it was a surrender. The commissioner of a league in a full-blown PR crisis, a league being investigated by Congress for potential civil rights violations, chose a golf swing over conversation. And it all comes back to Caitlin Clark. The WNBA has a problem. They have a cash cow they don't know how to handle, a player who makes them money, but doesn't fit the mold they've cultivated. This is the story of how a legend like Dan Patrick torched a commissioner for ducking the smoke, and why the fallout from Cathy Engelbert canceling this interview might be the final nail in the coffin for the league's credibility. It's a story of jealousy, pettiness, and a commissioner who bowed to her PR department instead of taking control of her league's destiny. How did we get here? And why is Caitlin Clark the catalyst for the league's self-destruction?
And of course, her fellow players in the league, and some of the hard fouls, the dirty play, the vindictiveness, the jealousy, the pettiness, what I believe to be an element of racism, what I believe to be an element of Caitlin Clark being straight and not part of the alphabet community, and her being bullied, frankly, because of her.
Dan Patrick saw the playbook. The hostility Caitlin Clark faces is undeniable. It's vindictiveness, it's jealousy, and as many have noted, it borders on a dangerous prejudice against a player who represents a different agenda. Caitlin Clark isn't just a rookie. She is a seismic disruption. She is the straight, white, Midwestern superstar who has shattered attendance records and brought a new demographic to the WNBA, and for that, she's being bullied. The league has built its identity on being an activist haven, but they forgot it was still a business. Caitlin Clark's presence revealed the cracks in their foundation, exposing a league that prefers ideology over profitability. And the commissioner, instead of managing this tectonic shift, chose to run and hide, leaving Dan Patrick, a basketball lifer, to call out the cowardice. Cathy Engelbert's cancellation is not an isolated incident. It is the culmination of a season-long failure to manage the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. Since the moment Caitlin Clark entered the league, the WNBA has been in a state of emergency. The hard fouls and dirty play aimed at Clark aren't just physical. They are a desperate attempt to diminish the light that Caitlin Clark brings. But she is not the problem. She is the solution. Cathy Engelbert's job was to protect her product. By ducking Dan Patrick, she admitted she can't control it. Let's dissect the strategic fallout of this cowardice. When Congress starts sniffing around for civil rights violations because a player like Caitlin Clark is being targeted, you don't cancel interviews. You go on the offensive. Dan Patrick was offering the WNBA a lifeline. A fair, albeit tough, platform to answer the tough questions about the league's treatment of Caitlin Clark. Instead, the commissioner, reportedly overruled by her PR staff, demonstrated a shocking lack of leadership. She made Dan Patrick and his entire crew wait for 2 hours, only to leave them high and dry.
And 2 hours later, with no update, and then we get a feeble response. Like, come on. You don't want to do it. You won't. The commissioner of the NFL does not want to come on this show. I've been doing this for 20 years. There's a reason why he doesn't want to come on. I have no problem if he doesn't want to come on. But if he said to me, hey, I'll come on tomorrow, And then all of a sudden he says the NFL PR department said I shouldn't do it. Like, and she's 50 yards away.
The comparison Dan Patrick drew was devastating. When the commissioner of the NFL ducks you, it's business. But when a commissioner, especially one overseeing a league propped up by NBA welfare, says yes and then hides because a PR flack tells her to, it reveals the WNBA as a joke. Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, needs to take notice. This is a PR disaster that threatens the entire ecosystem. Dan Patrick pointed out the farce of Engelbert doing a soft radio interview in Kansas City about expansion, but refusing to address the Caitlin Clark elephant in the room with him. This is a direct insult to the intelligence of the fans, the players, and Caitlin Clark, who has to endure this circus daily. For Caitlin Clark, the lack of support from the highest office is telling. Engelbert could have used the Dan Patrick interview to definitively protect Caitlin Clark from the vindictiveness and jealousy plaguing the league. Instead, she validated the critics' accusations. She chose to side with the aggressors rather than the cash cow, allowing the agendized narrative to fester. The long-term strategic consequence is that the league is now perceived as unprofessional and scared. Dan Patrick essentially stated that this is what happens when you run a welfare league. You don't act like professionals, you act like gatekeepers trying to keep the new girl out. The fallout is that Caitlin Clark's presence is now a liability to the WNBA's brand, simply because the leadership is incompetent.
I think I can still watch it on Peacock. And then I think it's on YouTube or something like that. Anyway, you're talking about, by the way, a real basketball guy. Everybody knows the one thing that Dan Patrick knows above everything else is the game of basketball. He's talked a shit ton of it for the last 35, 40 years. Cathy Engelbert had an opportunity right here to come on, dodged it.
Cathy Engelbert had the chance to stand tall, and she dodged it. Dan Patrick delivered the truth. If the PR staff is telling the commissioner not to speak to a legend like Dan Patrick, then maybe it's time to get new people in the PR department. This is the psychological hurdle the WNBA faces. They are terrified of the questions about Caitlin Clark. Are the fouls dirty? Is there a jealousy element? Is Caitlin Clark's sexuality a factor in her treatment? They won't address it because to address it is to admit the toxicity exists. Dan Patrick also highlighted the hypocrisy of the situation. The league is being investigated by Congress, and the CEO, Cathy Engelbert, is worried about a softball media hit instead of preparing for Capitol Hill. The alphabet community versus straight argument that was raised in the source material shows how deeply the culture wars have infiltrated the league. Caitlin Clark is a symbol of what the old guard fears, a player who doesn't need the activist platform to be successful. She just needs a basketball. The WNBA's unwillingness to embrace Caitlin Clark as the savior is a direct result of this cultural clash, and Cathy Engelbert's cowardice is the symptom. The financial and team chemistry impact of this debacle is already being felt, and it is franchise-altering. Dan Patrick's crew noted that viewership is dropping. We have already seen the Fever's own COO, Amber Cox, engaging in unprofessional online spats, fighting with the very fans who buy the tickets. The leadership, from the front office to the coach, Stephanie White, is trickling off fans right now. They are losing money because they are alienating the Caitlin Clark fan base, the only market that has shown exponential growth. Let's look at the high-stakes climax of this story. Dan Patrick and his crew exposed the WNBA as a joke. The league is so busy being agendized that they're forgetting they are an entertainment product. The PR department created the cancellation to protect Engelbert, but in doing so, they made the league look weaker. Imagine the headlines, "Commissioner afraid to face Dan Patrick." This is a PR apocalypse. The future predictions are grim. Congress will likely get a benign non-answer from Engelbert, which will lead to a humiliating public grilling on Capitol Hill. The league will become a political punching bag, all because they couldn't handle a few questions about Caitlin Clark.